I am very happy to be here with Haben Girma today. Haben is one of my personal heroes and my very good friend. And I am very excited to ask her questions that were sent in from all of you, from teachers, from students, from Instagram, and from TikTok. So Haben, are you ready to answer some questions?
Ready.
All right, here we go with the first question. How are you communicating today? What technology are you using and what technology do you use?
Hello, everyone. You are probably noticing a delay between when Mychal asks me a question and when I respond. I'm deafblind and I'm not hearing Mychal, but I'm reading his words on a braille display. For those of you who know blind tech, this is a braille note touch plus, and it's connected through Bluetooth to a Logitech recording keyboard. So we have the words coming through in braille, and we have a culture that prioritizes speed and pressures us to be fast in everything we do all the time. But that's not the most inclusive environment, and it leaves out voices that we would all benefit from. So today we are role modeling a society where we can access voices, whether that's through hearing or reading or sign languages, and in this case, American Sign Language. There's sign languages all over the world. So that's the tech we're using today. In the future, I would love to have more tech that harnesses the power of AI to increase access to spoken words and convert them from speech to text. The AI generated text often has errors. My name is changed from Haben Girma to Haben Grandma. And I'm told that the AI we have today does that. So we know there's more room to grow in terms of AI. It's exciting to imagine the possibilities, and it's motivation to keep designing, developing, but we need to make sure disabled people join us in those journeys. So tech companies need to be hiring disabled engineers. When we do testing, include disabled people in that testing. And that's for all tech. Even tech you may not imagine disabled people being involved with. Space shuttles should be designed with disabled astronauts in mind. So anytime you're developing tech, even if you've never imagined disabled people in that field or using that tech, start with disabled-led designs. Thank you, Mychal.
Thank you. I don't want to jinx anything, but when your technology isn't working, what do you do?
Mychal and I met in DC at the White House. And on that day, my tech stopped working. You can imagine that was probably very stressful. I was on stage at the White House and suddenly there were tech issues. And I didn't know what the tech issues were. Just suddenly I was no longer getting my captions. I no longer had access to what was happening on stage. So I went off stage. My bag has backup batteries and a backup keyboard and wires, and I began trying to solve the situation. And we switched over to a wired keyboard, and I went back on stage and continued the panel. So there are two things I want to highlight there. One, I was prepared for tech issues. I know they will happen. Even when I'm working with tech companies, they'll tell me, sorry, we're having technical difficulties. They always happen, so be prepared. The other piece is the community around you, your fellow panelists, the audience, the hosting organization also needs to be supportive and making space for you and the community to solve those tech issues. There will always be some kind of unexpected situations, and how you respond to those unexpected situations is where we create inclusion. That's the heart of the culture of inclusion, giving people grace and space and patience to find those solutions. Mychal and my friend Eric Harris, who's from Disability Rights California, and another panelist, Jean, they were all fantastic, and they gave me the grace and patience and space to come on and off stage and solve those tech issues. So that's what I do with tech issues. Back to you.
No, thank you. I can just say you did it very gracefully. So I love that you mentioned the word grace and how you handled the situation. It was pure grace. We honestly didn't even notice. We were just having fun up there, having a conversation with you.
You didn't notice?
We've never been to the White House before. We were just excited to be there on stage. We thought maybe you just wanted to have fun, stepping up and down. We all wanted to do the exact same thing.
I missed it.
Getting away briefly from technology, how did you feel when you got into Harvard?
I was a combination of nervous and worried, but also exuberant. I originally did not want to go to Harvard. Harvard is in Cambridge, and Cambridge is cold. So when I was looking into law schools, I was looking into law schools in California, and my legal advisor at college warned me that at the time in 2009, a lot of law student graduates were struggling to find work. And as a Black woman, as a deaf-blind woman, it would be even harder for me to find work. So he said, if you wanted to increase your chances of getting a job, you should go to one of the top-ranked schools. So even though I didn't really want to go to Harvard because of the cold and the competitiveness, it's not just weather. There are many different kinds of cold.
Testing. So for accessibility purposes, I'll say my name and describe myself. My name is Harris Myrick, and I live in Los Angeles. So I came here to see both of you today because you have worked with my colleague Eric Harris on the Disability Rights California Board. I am a person with lived experience of a mental health condition who's been speaking out about that. The question that I want to ask, because if people don't know who Eric is, if you put the three of you together, you have three people of color, three Black people. And so I want to ask about the intersectionality of racism and ableism and samenism and how that's impacted actually both of you. Because I know sometimes I can struggle with trying to understand when racism is happening, do I have a mental illness, or is it because somebody has done something discriminatory towards me? So how do we segregate all of that out, and how do both of you do it?
Thank you so much for being here. and for sharing such an excellent question. You also gave us the reminder to do visual descriptions, so I will do that. I am a Black woman. I have a guide dog next to me, a braille display on my lap, and I want to share a story that is about visual descriptions and the intersection of disability and racism. One of my blind friends, once upon a time, was an acquaintance. And in that early stage when we were figuring out more about each other, he asked me, "Have you ever traveled?" And I said, "Oh, yes. I was recently in Sweden. I have family in Sweden." And the rest of that summer, my friend imagined me as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white Swedish girl. He figured out his mistake and told me this and laughed about it. The mistake was not because of blindness, but because of internalized racism, biases. A lot of us assume that when we hear Swedish, that the person must be white, or if we say European, that the person must be white. But there are Swedes and Europeans with all kinds of skin tones. And our culture and training in the United States has trained us to assume white as the default. And I've had that experience of people assuming I'm white. And I shared this story online, and one person commented, "Well, big deal. What's wrong with people assuming you're white?" For one thing, it's not true. For the second thing, it denies blind people of color the opportunity to know that they are being represented. And I feel this jolt of surprise and excitement and pride when I find out that we have more people of color represented in spaces where we often don't have people of color, like in positions of power or in tech or in other areas where we're underrepresented. If sighted people are getting access to visual information, then blind people should also get access to visual information. So that is one area where ableism and racism intersect. Mychal, do you want to share?
Yeah, I would love to share again. I think as best I possibly can. You said you came from LA. Thank you so much for doing that. I'm glad that you're here and that you seem to be safe. I've been praying for LA and the people of LA quite a bit, so I'm glad to see you here today. And for the sake also of physical descriptions, I am a Black man. I am Black, Mexican, and white. I have brown skin. My hair is in braids. I have a whole bunch of the world's silliest tattoos. And to answer your question, I think there's a lot of intersection. I think you also asked how also do we address it? How do we deal with it? It's been something very difficult for me. I grew up in and live in Solano County, which has often been the most diverse, one of the most diverse counties in America for several decades, but there are still a lot of problems that plague Solano County in Northern California. And I'm sure you all have noticed in visiting local libraries, there are not that many people of color or various backgrounds in libraries, and it's something that I dealt with for a very long time. I've been going to libraries since I was probably 3 years old, with my mom who homeschooled me, who is here today. And that was also, it was very difficult to just not see people in the library. As much as I love the library, I never thought it was a profession for me because I didn't see men behind the library desks and I didn't see people of color behind the library desk. So I'm very proud to be a library loving person. I'm proud to have become a librarian and been a supervising librarian, and especially proud to be a Black librarian, to be a brown librarian. And I bring that up in relation to your question about intersection, because I posted that on social media several times, and almost every single time, there's always someone who says, why can't you just be proud to be a librarian? Why do you have to bring race into it? I think it's very important because it's who I am. It's what I identify with. It's what I'm proud of. It's what I was raised to be proud of. And there were oftentimes people who looked like me, who looked like Haben, who looked like many people in this room, were not allowed to have a library card. We're not allowed to visit libraries. My grandmother and grandfather did not have library cards. They couldn't visit libraries for a very long time, and they're some of the smartest people I ever met. So I am proud to be an offspring of them. Everything I do is to make them very, very proud. So that's why I talk proudly of that. And one of my, I'm going to give you two library stories, is one of my favorite ones in answering. This is basically how I address it, how I deal with it, is the library kids, is the joy that they bring me. Is there was one library kid I used to visit, like a child start, so like a kindergarten preschool site. Almost every single week I would go read them stories. And one time, one of the kids was getting ready to move away from the area. So they were very, very sad. So I came in to read the story, and she ran up to me. She said, Mr. Mychal, I'm moving away. I'm not going to see you anymore, but I want you to know I want to be a brown librarian. And then another little kid, which I don't usually identify race of kids, but this kid was white. And this little kid said, I want to be a brown librarian. And the other person who was capable of being a brown librarian had them on his shoulder and said, we can all be brown librarians. I don't know how I thought this was possible, but it gives me hope that that's what we saw. And the second one, just dealing with those questions, saying, why are you proud to be a Black librarian? Why are you proud to be a brown librarian? And the intersection of all these things that we deal with is because there was a little library kid who dressed like myself for Halloween. They were brown kids. They had their afro. I usually have a big giant afro. Their afro was picked out to no end. They were rocking it. They had a Hawaiian shirt on. And the library grown up had made like a lanyard based on my lanyard around the neck of library badge. So there's a library kid who possibly wants to become a librarian because they saw a library person who looked like that. So moments like those are how I keep going and try to say, yes, this is why I talk about it, just because some people don't know that this isn't always how society was. Now we can be anything. That's important to talk about, to show library kids that they can become anything.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Visual description of myself. I too am a Black woman. I have micro locks in my hair and I'll do heart-shaped glasses. And heart-shaped glasses and bright, colorful attire. Going off of the intersectionality question, I am an educational administrator, been working in schools for many, many years. My question is really around how do we start to shift the idea around value and what is valuable? As a person who is an ADHDer, autistic with ADHD and mental health issues, I am curious to how we start to shift this narrative around, oh, the first one finished, or the loudest one in the classroom, introversion versus extroversion, the one who has to move and things like that. How do we shift this to really highlight the values in all of the variability in our students?
I love that question. I feel like the way we shift culture is by giving people more examples that challenge the status quo. So within a classroom, featuring more books or films or articles that represent different styles so that students realize that there are different ways to communicate and different speeds of communication. communication are just as valuable. I feel like a lot of testing is also speed-based. There are lots of elements around school that are about those traditional values of speed, and we need to have a more thorough conversation of how we can challenge that and maybe focus more like on the quality of an essay rather than on how quickly one writes it, and give people additional time and worry less about the time and more on the quality of the work that's being produced. So it's giving people more examples will help shift the culture and change what we value and give us stronger and more inclusive values.
No, that's so well said, and I also really love your question. It's such an important one, especially for you as an administrator, as an educator. And I completely agree with everything Haben said. And I would also suggest we have so many town halls, we have so many discussions with just the grown-ups, with the teachers, with the adults. I would suggest bring the kids into it. Bring the elementary school kids, the middle school kids, the high school kids. Ask them that question. Ask them what they need. Ask the introverted kids, the extroverted kids, the autistic kids, the disabled kids. Ask them, how can we make this better for you? And like Haben's been saying, actually listen to what they say, because I think we think we know what's best for them because we care so much. We have so much empathy. We have so much compassion. We want them to be the best possible versions of themselves, but we forget that they are very capable and they would love to tell us what they need and what they want. And they may just say, we need more dog man books. We need more Diary of a Kid books. That's all. We need more manga. We just want to watch Netflix all day in the classroom. Meet them halfway when we may be able to say, you know what? This is where we're going to get. Maybe they need more lights in the classroom. Just figure out, I think that's important. I think so oftentimes kids don't actually get to talk about these things that plague them. They don't get to talk about their anxiety. They don't get to talk about what they feel being disabled, being mentally ill, and be able to give them that space, maybe able to create exactly what Haben just said, to create new values. And I especially love the idea of changing what it takes to grade a paper. Just saying, you know what? Yes, we're going to grade your paper, but hey, maybe this is a D paper, and these are the tools. So we're going to keep on letting you retry it until you get to that A level, and that's changing the curriculum. That's changing the way that we look at education to make the best possible students.
Hi, Haben and Mychal. Thanks for answering so many questions. I'm Kiran Kaja. I live in Berkeley, and I am Indian from the Indian subcontinent. I've been blind since birth, and I'm here with my golden retriever, dog India. Slightly heavy question, maybe. As somebody has been blind since birth and grew up in India, lived in the UK, and now in the US. One of the things that I always have felt and have not really realized is how isolating disability is sometimes when you're living in a society that's very vision/hearing oriented. I also know that isolation is a larger issue amongst the deafblind community. So a couple of things. How do you deal with isolation? And also, can we kind of think about like what institutions and what advice would you have for people who may not experience disability and do to kind of help the blind, deafblind, and the larger disability community, deal with some of that isolation issue?
That is such a fantastic question, Karan, and I think relevant to non-disabled people as much as it is to disabled people. How do we find social connection, especially when there are additional barriers to social connection? And I try to tackle it with one area at a time. So, for example, I love dancing, but dancing is a very visual activity. People sit and watch the dancers. They decide who are the good dancers. Then they wait for them to finish a dance, walk up to them, make eye contact, smile, ask, would you like to dance? There are so many visual and auditory elements involved that I'm not able to do in that specific style. So those were visual and auditory barriers. And I decided to tackle it one dancer at a time. So when I arrive, I would ask the organizer to recommend a dancer, and I would dance with them. And at the end of the dance, before they walk away, I'd ask, can you introduce me to another dancer? And they usually have one person they know there, and they'll go and ask that one person, and I'll dance with that one person. And then afterwards, I'll ask them, can you introduce me to another dancer? So that is my strategy. And since then, I've developed friends who also love dancing and value accessibility. And next time I go to the dance place, I have that system in place. I have friends, I have dancers who know me and are not intimidated by deafblindness or the keyboard. So every deafblind person is different. What I need is different from what a different deafblind person would need. Someone else might have tactile sign language interpreters instead of the Braille computer and keyboard. Or somebody else might be doing visual signing, or someone else might be a lip reader. Everyone is different. So there isn't a universal accessibility solution, but everyone can be open to learning and adapting, both disabled people and non-disabled people. And you learn one person at a time, one dancer at a time, to make our different communities more accessible. So what are the things that bring you joy? Parks, gardens, libraries, restaurants. And then go there, find the librarian or a waiter or a park ranger and ask them about accessibility. Ask them if they can introduce you to other people who share those passions. And slowly, one person at a time, you start to build your community that's inclusive. So that is kind of my strategy for building social connection in a world that tends to leave us feeling isolated. How about you, Michael? How do you deal with isolation?
You know what? It's so very difficult. I'm so glad that you've asked this question. I think it's a question we need to address in 2025 and so much more beyond. It's so important that we have these honest conversations. I think so often, I think first of all, I think we need to use a library as a public space and have conversations where we can come together as strangers waiting to become friends. Mr. Rogers, helper, waiting to help more and more people. I always find a way to talk about Mr. Rogers. just coming into the library and having this space where we can have a program to just talk about these things, talk about isolation, talk about how we can learn more from disabled folks, from mentally ill folks, and people of all different backgrounds. And for libraries, not just have it happen one time. Have one program and say, you know what, only 3 people showed up, we're going to cancel this program. You have to keep it going. You have to have it months in a row, 12 months in a row, 24 months in a row, because those are 3 people that you're helping. Those are 3 people that you needed. And then word of mouth spreads, and maybe more and more people will keep on showing up. I think that's a bare minimum. That's what libraries can start to do. It's such an easy thing to do. We're already working for the public, for the community, and kind of like I was saying, just talk to people. Talk to people who are different than you, and then multiple people. I mean, I don't speak for all Black people. Speak to multiple people from my background. Haben doesn't speak for all disabled people. Other people feel different ways. You have to have multiple conversations, to have multiple perspectives. So like Haben said, you can keep on learning. You can keep on growing. You can keep on enhancing your ability to help more and more people. And for me, my life has been plagued by isolation for a very long time. I told you about my various mental illnesses. I'm getting ready to turn 35 years old in February. I did not think I was going to live to see my 35th birthday. I did not like myself very much. I'm on a journey to learn to love myself. So that's how I'm coping with isolation. I was finally brave enough. I had the courage to share with my family about my struggles. I reached out for help. I finally asked my friends, very few friends, it's hard to make friends as an adult. I asked them for help. I always thought if I talked with them about these things, about isolation, they wouldn't want to be my friend or that's all it would be about. But I said, hey, I need help. And to my surprise, they helped me and they're still my friends. They still make fun of me when I do silly things, when I mispronounce words. They still send me gifts. They still send me videos on social media. And then when my friends aren't around, for isolation, it's just, I have my comfort TV shows. I love King of the Hill. I love the Golden Girls. I like going for mental health walks for my silly mental health. And I love being at home with my two silly cats. They help a lot with isolation. Machine Gun Kitty and Kissing Cat Barlow. Sometimes their silly names helps out quite a bit. So, and also just asking more people like you just asked, what do you do for your isolation? Because we always need more tricks in our bag to help ourselves get through the day. So thank you for asking. I believe that we are all out of time for the public Q&A questions, but Haben and I are going to be here for a little bit longer. I think you may even get to talk with Haben via her incredible technology. You can see it for yourself. And I will also be here if you would like to answer any questions. And before I turn it over to Haben for the final word, I would just like to say thank you so very much for joining us today. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be here to talk about these incredibly important things. And thank you to Haben for inviting me to talk with you. I always look forward to it. I had asked Haben if he was ever going to be coming to libraries to talk about these sort of things, and she did it and came to Berkeley to have this conversation. So I am proud and honored to be in Haben Girma's work.
It is such an honor to be here with Mychal. And I was talking about accessibility with Mychal, and that after I met him, I checked his social media account and he was adding visual descriptions to his videos and photos. That is still super rare. A lot of content online is not accessible to me, but Mychal's social media posts are accessible. And I love learning from him, and hopefully you all are following him on social media. We have an amazing group of people here, and I want to encourage everyone to meet two new people. You can ask, what action have you been inspired to take? What action have Mychal and Haben inspired you to take? And listen to their answers and learn about new ways we can make our communities more accessible. Thank you, everyone.